2018 is almost done. I don't know what 2019 has in store for me. I'm in this weird spot where I cover both anime and fighting games. I would imagine in 2019, I'm probably going to make a definitive decision on which one of these two things I want to permanently cover and which one of these two things I'm going to leave behind. Whichever one I do end up leaving behind, I'm still going to personally indulge in these two things. If I end up covering specifically anime, I'm still going to play fighting games in my own privacy. If I end up covering specifically fighting games, I'm still going to watch anime in my own privacy. But 2018 has been an incredible ride with such amazing fighting games coming out. 2018 definitely feels deserving of a top 5 fighting game list, so let's get straight into it. Before we get into this list, remember that I'm ordering these based on the online experience you can have with each game. I'm not taking into account any single player content. Even if I mention it, it wasn't taken into account for its placing on the list. There were other fighting games released in 2018 that don't make it onto this list, and I will not be covering games not released in 2018 that did receive content updates in 2018. So this would disclude a game like Brawlhalla. Despite how amazing it did in 2018, it wasn't released in 2018, so I'm not adding it to this list. First of all, I do want to do an honorable mention, and that's a Fantasy Strike. The reason Fantasy Strike doesn't make the cut is because it's actually in early access. If you haven't heard of it before, it's actually really interesting. However, sadly, it doesn't even come close to having a large enough player base. But if you can find someone to play with, this is a fantastic fighting game with some really interesting concepts and mechanics. If you have a friend interested in trying to get into fighting games, please, I urge you to purchase a copy of this game for yourself and for your friend. It's a perfect entry to the genre. Alright, with that out of the way, we can officially get into my top 5 fighting games of 2018, starting with BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle. The big appeal for me going into Cross Tag Battle was the Ruby characters. I love Ruby as a franchise, but this was going to be my first BlazBlue game. Well, it's not even technically a BlazBlue game, but it's got BlazBlue in the title, so for the sake of the conversation, we're going to consider it a BlazBlue game. I never stuck with the game for long, but I can say that Arc System Works took a few steps forward to perfecting that balance between depth for high-level players and low barrier to entry for those low-level players. It seems like with every new Arc System Works title, we're getting closer and closer to the ideal fighting game for both veterans and newcomers alike, and Cross Tag Battle is certainly an important step on that road. We're still not quite there yet. However, if you're a fan of any of these franchises, Cross Tag Battle is probably for you. Number 4, SOULCALIBUR 6. My first SOULCALIBUR title. For my personal tastes, it doesn't quite hit the mark. I dislike ring outs on a fundamental level. That is a much larger conversation that's probably not suited for this video, but in short, I think death is too volatile of a reward or punishment for bad positioning. SOULCALIBUR did, however, open my eyes to just how great a create a character system can be in a fighting game, offering someone like me, someone not at all interested in the gameplay of SOULCALIBUR, hundreds of hours of gameplay purely because of this additional feature with create a character. It's certainly something that I would love to see more fighting games expand upon rather than just having it be the SOULCALIBUR thing, especially because the same developer, I believe, works on Tekken. So I don't see why Tekken maybe couldn't expand upon this feature in the future. Who knows? At number 3, we have Blade Strangers, the little indie fighting game that could. Blade Strangers tries to do a similar thing that Arc System Works titles have been doing lately, but instead of doing that in an anime fighting game genre, a really high-paced, fast genre, they've instead done it to a slower, more grounded game, something much closer to, say, Street Fighter. Past that, though, this game is actually really difficult to describe. Blade Strangers is actually really special. I would highly recommend picking up this game, even if it's just to try it out. Hopefully you can find a deal on it, or even at full price. I would say it's worth trying out if you're interested in fighting games in general. It does have a fairly limited player base, so you're probably going to have to look around on Discord communities to find people to play with, but if you can get past that, it's certainly an interesting concept that I would like to see more fighting games expand upon, and it looks like Arc System Works is picking up a very similar thing next year with the Blue game. Number 2, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It was really difficult for me to place Ultimate on this list. I didn't know where to place it. If we're measuring these games purely for their multiplayer online, which is the measurement for this list, I can't really think highly of Super Smash Bros. However, with a roster of over 70 characters and a stage select screen of over 100, it's hard to say that Smash isn't deserving of a slot on this list, especially one as high as this one. However, I do think there's a lot of flaws with the game that people don't talk about because it's Super Smash Bros. And people don't want to be negative towards it, but I'll bear the cross. The entire idea of a short hop and a tall hop being on the same button is just ridiculous. The A+B shortcut for attack short hop feels useless past low level play. Not being able to disable smash attacks on the left stick while performing smash attacks on the C stick, or even vice versa, unfortunately results in a lot of both high-level players and low-level players frequently doing input errors. No matter how you have your controller layout, it just feels outdated, and there's no excuse for this in 2018 when we could just have an option to rebind all of this stuff. However, in Ultimate, it's really limited, and I would have liked to have seen that changed, especially considering the progress being made in the genre elsewhere with games like Brawlhalla or even Rivals of Aether. And my number one slot, Dragon Ball FighterZ. Now, before you jump down my throat for being biased towards the anime game, let's first of all establish that going into Dragon Ball FighterZ, I had never finished Dragon Ball Z. I'd only seen bits and pieces since when I was a kid, and I had never even watched a single episode of Super. In fact, I'm not even sure I knew it existed. Despite that, I loved this game. Part of the problem with fighting games isn't necessarily the learning curve. It's while you're at the bottom of that learning curve, you're not really playing the same game as everybody else. If you're still learning Shoryuken inputs in Street Fighter V, you're not playing the game that everyone else is when you hit the ranked button. Thankfully, fighting games are noticing this problem and slowly adapting to it. But Dragon Ball FighterZ in particular has done an amazing job of keeping that learning curve at around the same curvature, while still allowing players at the bottom of that curve to have as much fun as possible. It's an outstanding fighting game experience, and I'm sure you're already aware of that. Here's my quick buyer's guide for these games, because I think it's kind of important, because even though I just kind of did my quick summary of each of these games and my personal experiences with them, I didn't necessarily got to talk about whether it's worth you buying. BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle has an additional franchise on the way, meaning that more DLC is probably inevitable, both for a new franchise being added and the already existing ones. Hopefully that means I finally get a 5th Ruby character. It's a game I'm still excited about to this day, although if you don't already own this game, it's probably a risky purchase for you, and I would wait for it to go on sale or see if you can try out the game some other way. SOULCALIBUR 6 will almost definitely be a worthwhile purchase for you if you're at all interested in single player content. The multiplayer, however, I would say is an acquired taste. I would say that this purchase is almost definitely a risk unless you just love the idea of create a character, or alternatively you've played other SOULCALIBUR titles and you know what you're getting yourself into, in which case, in either of these cases, you probably already own the game or have decided not to purchase it. Blade Strangers has a limited player base, but certainly worth trying if you get the chance, and hopefully you can find some other people to consistently play with. Smash Ultimate is a fantastic buy and will continue to be throughout the entire life cycle of the Nintendo Switch, and even probably sometime after until we get a new one. With that said, the online options are incredibly limited. Even after a month, it doesn't look like they're going to get any better. It just makes the game feel dated. Along with outdated controller options, it can certainly be frustrating at times. With that said, the Smash Bros. DLC cycle is looking like it's going to be a pretty crazy one, with the first character already being announced being Joker, which is a pretty big surprise right there. It's hard not to be excited about Ultimate, even with the qualms that I have with it. At this point, it's looking like Dragon Ball FighterZ won't have a Season 2. So with that said, the already dwindling player base is probably about to fade even further. If you live in a low populated area like I do, PlayStation 4 is pretty much the only platform you can consistently find players on. If you're lucky to live in a very high populated region like America, you should be able to find games no problem, no matter what platform you're on. But just know, if you do live in one of those low populated areas, not only is it difficult to find games, but when you do, the connection isn't great. Let me know if I missed your favorite fighting game in 2018. This video took a long time to edit, so I'd really appreciate a thumbs up on the video. It helps other people find it. My name has been BlazBlue. If you could subscribe to keep up to date with future content, that would be awesome. And I will see you in the next video.